A very good morning to all. Now, today we are going to discuss the Chapter 7 Tax Invoice Credit and Debit Notes, Section 31 to 34. Tax Invoice, Section 31. Subsection 1. A registered person supplying taxable goods shall, before or at the time of removal of the goods, for supply to the recipients where the supply involves movement of goods or delivery of goods or making available thereof to the recipients. In any other case, issue a tax invoice showing the descriptions, quantity, and value of the goods, the tax charged thereon, and such other particulars as may be prescribed, provided that the government may, on the recommendation of the Council, by notification, specify the categories of goods or services in respect of which the tax invoice shall be issued, within such time and in such manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 2. A registered person supplying taxable services shall, before or after the provision service, but within a prescribed period, issue a tax invoice showing the descriptive value, tax charged thereon, and such other particulars as may be prescribed, provided that the government may, on the recommendation of the Council by notification, specify the categories of services or supplies in respect of which a tax invoice shall be issued within such time and such manner as may be prescribed, subject to the conditions mentioned therein, specify the categories of the services in respect of which any other documents issued in relation to supply shall be deemed to be a tax invoice, or tax invoice may not be issued. Subsection 3. Notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 1 and 2, a registered person within 1 month from the date of issuance of certificate of registration in such manner as may be prescribed, issue a revised invoice against the invoice already issued during the period beginning with effective date of registration till the date of issuance of certificate of registration to him is certified. A registered person may not
आपके साथ
issue
का एक क्या हुआ
a registered person
क्या
a
उसे
registered person may not issue a tax invoice if the value of goods or services or both supplied is less than 200 rupees, subject to such conditions and such manner as may be prescribed. A registered person supplying these exempted goods or services or both, or paying tax under the provisions of the section 10, shall issue instead of tax invoice a bill of supply containing such particulars and in such manner as may be prescribed, provided that the registered person may not issue a bill of supply if the value of the goods or services or both supplied is less than the 200 rupees, subject to such conditions and in such manner as may be prescribed. A registered person shall, on the receipt of advance payment with respect to any supply of goods or services or both, issue a receipt, voucher, or any other document containing such particulars as may be prescribed, evidencing the receipt of such payment, where on the receipt of payment of advance payment with respect to any supply of goods or services or both, the registered person issues a receipt voucher, but subsequently no supply is made and no tax invoice is issued in presence thereof. The said registered person may issue to the person who has made or made the payment a refund voucher against such payment. A registered person who is liable to pay tax under the subsection 3 or the subsection 4 of the section 9 shall issue an invoice in respect of goods or services or both uh, received by him from the supplier who is not registered on the date of receipt of the goods or services or both. A registered person who is liable to pay tax under the subsection 3 or the subsection 4 of the section 9 shall issue a payment voucher at the time of making the payment to the supplier. Subsection 4. In case of continuous supply of goods where the successive statement of accounts or the successive payment are involved, the invoice shall be issued before or at the time each such statement is issued, or as the case may be, each such payment is received. Subsection 5. Subject to the provisions of the Class D of the subsection 3, in case of continuous supply of services where the due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued on or before the due date of payment. Where the due date of payment is not ascertainable from the contract, the invoice shall be issued before or at the time when the supplier of the services receives the payment. Where the payment is linked to the completion of an event, the invoice shall be issued on or before the date of completion of that event. Subsection 6. In case where the supply of services ceases under a contract before the completion of the supply, the invoice shall be issued at the time when the supply ceases, and such invoice shall be issued to the extent of supply made before such cessation. Subsection 7. Notwithstanding anything contained in the subsection 1, where the goods or services are or taken on approval for sale or return are removed before the supply takes place, the invoice shall be issued before or at the time of supply or 6 months from the date of removal, or whichever is earlier. Explanation: for the purpose of this section, the expression tax invoice shall include any revised invoice issued by the supplier in respect of the supply made earlier. Section 31A. Facility of digital payment to recipient. The government may, on recommendation of the Council, prescribe the class of registered person who shall provide the prescribed mode of electronic payment to the recipient of the supply of goods or services or both made by him, and give an option to such a recipient to make the payment accordingly in such manner and subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed. As may be prescribed. Section 32, the prohibition of unauthorized collection of tax. Subsection 1. A person who is not registered shall not collect in respect of any supply of goods or services or both any supply any amount by way of tax under this act. Subsection 2. No registered person shall collect tax except in accordance with the provisions of this act or rules made thereunder. Section 33. Amount of tax to be indicated in the tax invoice and other documents, notwithstanding anything contained in this act or any other law for the time being in force, where any supply is made for consideration. Every person who is liable to pay the tax for such supply shall prominently indicate in all the documents relating to assessment tax, invoice, and other like documents the amount of tax which shall form the part of the price at which the such supply is made. Section 34. The credit and debit notes. Subsection 1. Where one or more tax invoice have been issued for the supply of any goods or services or both, and the taxable value or the tax charge therein that invoice is found to exceed the taxable value or the tax payable in respect of such a supply, or where the goods supplied are returned by the recipients, or where the goods or services or both supplied are found to be deficient, the registered person who has supplied such goods or services or both may issue to the recipients one or more credit note for the supplies made in the financial year containing such particulars as may be prescribed. Substitute for the words where a tax invoice has vivid the central government and the Service Tax Amendment Act 2018. The subsection 2 here, any registered person who issued the credit note in relation to the supply of goods or services or both shall declare the details of the such credit note in return for the month during which the such credit note has been issued, but not later than the 30 days of the November following the end of the financial year in which such a supply was made, or date of furnishing of the relevant annual return, whichever is earlier, and the tax liability shall be adjusted in such manner as may be prescribed, provided that no reduction in the outward output tax liability of the supplier shall be permitted if the incidence of the tax and the interest on the such supply has been passed on to any other person. The subsection 3, where one or more tax invoice have been issued for the supply of the any goods or services or both, and the taxable value or the tax charge in that tax invoice is found to be less than the taxable value or the tax payable in respect of the such supply, the registered person who has supplied such goods or services or both shall issue to the recipients one or more debit note for the supplies made in the financial year containing such particulars as may be prescribed. Subsection 4, any registered person who issues a debit note in relation to the supply of goods or services or both shall declare the details of the such debit note in the return for the month during which this such debit note has been issued, and the tax liability shall be adjusted in such manner as may be prescribed. Explanation: for the purpose of this act, the expression debit note shall include supplementary invoice, accounts and records. Accounts and records, the section 35 to 36. Accounts and records. Section 35, subsection 1, every registered person shall keep and maintain at his principal place of business as mentioned in the certificate of registration a true and correct accounts of the production or manufacture of the goods, inward and outward supply of goods or services for both stock of goods, input tax credit availed, output tax payable and tax payable and paid, and such other particulars as may be prescribed, provided that where in more than one place of business is specified in the certificate of registration, the accounts relating to each place of business shall be kept at such a place of business. Provided further that the registered person shall keep and maintain such accounts and other particulars in electronic form in such manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 2, every owner or operator of the warehouse or godown on any other place used for the storage of the goods, and every transporter, irrespective of whether he is a registered person or not, shall maintain records of the consigner, consignee, and other relevant details of the goods in such manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 3, the commissioner may notify a class of taxable person to maintain additional accounts or documents for such a purpose as may be specified in subsection 4, where the commissioner considers that any class of the taxable person is not in a position to keep and maintain the accounts in accordance with the provision of this section, he may, for the reasons to be recorded in writing, permit such class of the taxable person to maintain accounts in such manner as may be prescribed. Subsection 5, subsection 5 is been omitted. Subsection 6, subject to the provisions of the class H of the subsection 5 of the section 17, where the registered person fails to account the for the goods or services or both in accordance with the provision of the subsection 1, the proper officer shall determine the amount of the tax payable on the goods or services or both that are not accounted for as if the such goods or services or both has been supplied by the such person, and the provision of section 73 or 74 as the case may be, shall the mutus mute apply for the determination of the such tax apply for the determination of the such tax the section 36 period of retention of accounts period of retention of the account section 36 every registered person required to keep and maintain the books of accounts or other records in accordance with the provisions of the subsection 1 of the section subsection 1 of the section 35 shall retain them until the expiry of the 72 months from the due date of the furnishing of the annual return for the year pertaining to such accounts and records provided that the registered person who is a party to an appeal or revision or any other proceedings before any appellant authority or revisional authority or appellant tribunal or court, whether filed by him or by the commissioner or is under investigation for an offence under chapter 19, shall retain the books of accounts and other documents pertaining to the subject matter of such appeal or revision or proceedings or investigation for the period of 1 year after the final disposal of the such appeal or revision or proceedings or investigation for the period specified the above whichever is later whichever is later then the chapter 9 returns chapter 9 returns section 37 to 48 the furnishing of the section 37 the furnishing the details of outward supplies the subsection 1 every registered person other than an input service distributor, a non-resident taxable person, and a person paying the tax under the provisions of the section 10 or the section 51 or section 52 shall furnish the electronically subject to such conditions and restrictions and in such a manner, form and manner as may be prescribed the details of the outward supplies of the goods or services or both affected during a period tax period on or before the 10th day of the month preceding the said tax period and such details shall subject to such conditions and restrictions within such a time and in such a manner as may be prescribed be communicated to the recipient of the such said supplies such supplies provided that the commissioner may for the reasons to be recorded in writing by notification, extend the time limit for furnishing such details for such a class of the taxable person as may be specified therein. Provided further that any extension of the time limit they is notified by the commissioner of the sales tax or commissioner of the union territory tax shall be deemed to be notified by the commissioner by the commissioner the subsection 2 omitted the subsection 3 the any registered person who has furnished the details under the subsection 1 of any tax period shall upon discovery of any error or omission thereof rectify such error or omission in such a manner as may be prescribed and shall pay the tax and interest if any in a case where there is a short payment of the tax on account of the such error or omission in the return to be furnished for such a tax period, provided that no rectification of error or omission in the respect of the details furnished under the subsection 1 shall be allowed after the 30 days of the November following the end of the financial year to which such details pretends or furnish of the furnishing of the relevant annual returns, whichever is earlier. Explanation for the purpose of this chapter, the expression details of the outward the supplies shall include details of the invoice, debit note, credit note, and revision revised invoice issued in the relation to the outward supplies made during any tax period. Subsection 4 the registered person shall not be allowed to furnish the details of outward supplies under the subsection 1 for the tax period if the details of the outward supplies for any of the previous period a tax period has not been furnished by him, provided that the government may, on the recommendation of the council, by the notification subject to the such conditions and restrictions as may be specified therein, allow a registered person or a class of registered person to furnish the details of outward supplies under subsection 1, even if he has not furnished the details of outward supplies for one or more previous tax period. The subsection 5, the registered person shall not be allowed to furnish the details of the outward supplies under the subsection 1 for the tax period after the expiry of the period of 3 years from the due date of the furnishing the said details, provided that the government may, on the recommendation of the council by the notification subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be specified, they in allow a registered person or a class of the registered person to furnish the details of the outward supplies for the tax period under subsection 1, even after the expiry of the said the period of 3 years from the due date of furnishing the said details said details the said details furnishing of the outward supply inward supplies of section 38, the subsection 1, the details of outward supplies furnished by the registered person under subsection 1 of the section 37 and of the such other supplies as may be prescribed, and an auto generated statement containing the details of the inward input tax credit shall be made available electronically to the recipients of the such supplies in such form and a manner within such a time and subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed, substituted for every registered person other than an input service distributor or a non-resident taxable person, or the person paying the tax under this provision of the section 10, the section 51 or 52 shall verify, validate, modify, or delete, if required, the details relating to the outward supplies and credit notes, credit or debit notes communicated under subsection 1 of the section 37, to prepare the details of his inward supplies and the credit or debit note, and may include therein the details of the inward supplies and credit and debit note received by him in respect of the such supplies that has not been declared by the supplier under the subsection 1 of the section 37, subsection 2, the auto-generated statement under subsection 1 shall consist of the details of inward supplies in respect of which the credit of the input tax may be available to the recipients, and the details of the supplies in respect of which such credit cannot be availed, whether wholly or partly, by the recipients on the account of the details of the said supplies been furnished under the subsection 1 of the section 37 by any registered person within the such period of taking registration as may be prescribed, or any by any registered person who has defaulted in the payment of the tax, and where such default has continued for such a period as may be prescribed, or by any registered person, the outward the output tax payable by him, by whom, in accordance with the statement of the outward supplies furnished by him under the subsection said subsection during the such period as may be prescribed, exceeds the output tax paid by him during the said period, by which such a limit as may be prescribed, or any by any a registered person who during the such a period as may be prescribed has availed the credit or the credit of input tax of an amount that exceeds the a credit that can be availed by him in accordance with the class A, which by such a limit as may be prescribed, or any registered person who has defaulted in discharging his tax liability in accordance with the provision of the subsection 12 of the section 49, subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed, or by such other class of person as may be prescribed, the substitute for or every registered person other than an input tax input service distributor or a non-resident taxable person or person paying the tax under the provisions of the section 10 or 51 or 52 shall furnish the electronically the details of inward supplies of the taxable goods or services of both including the inward supplies of the goods or services of both by which the tax is payable on the reverse charge basis under this act, and inward supplies of the goods or services are both taxable under the integrated goods and service tax or on which the integrated goods and service tax is payable under the section 3 of the Customs Tariff Act 1975 and credit or debit note received in respect of the such supplies during the period after 10th day during, but not the on or before the 15th day of the month succeeding the tax period in such form and manner as may be prescribed, provided that the commissioner may, for the reasons to be recorded in writing by notification, extend the time limit for furnishing such details for such a class of the taxable person as may be prescribed. Specified therein, provided further that the extension of the time limit notified by the commissioner of the state tax or the commissioner of the union territory tax shall be deemed to be notified by the commissioner. Subsection 3 omitted subsection 4 also omitted subsection 5 I, um, I also omitted uh, furnishing of the returns section 39 section 39 furnishing of the returns the subsection 1 every registered person other than the input service distributor or non-resident taxable person or the person paying the tax under the provision of the section 10 or the section 51 or the section 52 shall on every calendar month or part thereof furnish a return electronically of the inward the and outward supplies of the goods or services or both the input tax credit availed or the tax payable the tax paid and other particulars in such a form and manner within such the time as may be prescribed, provided that the government may on the recommendation of the council notify the certain class of registered person who shall furnish a return for every quarter or part thereof, subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be notified. They substituted for every registered person other than the input service distributor or the non-resident the taxable person or the person paying the tax under the provisions of the section 10, section 51 or section 52 shall for every calendar month or part thereof furnish in such a form, manner, and within such a time as may be prescribed a return electronically of the inward and outward supplies of the goods or services or both input tax credit availed, the tax payable, tax paid, and such other particulars as may be prescribed, provided that the government may, on the recommendation of the council, notify the certain classes of the registered person who shall furnish the return for every quarter or part thereof, subject to such conditions and safeguard as may be prescribed. As may be prescribed subsection 2, a registered person paying the tax under the provisions of the section 10 shall for each financial year apart thereof furnish a return electronically of the turnover in the state of the state or union territory inward supplies of the goods and services of both the tax payable, tax paid, and such other particulars in such form and manner and within such a time as may be prescribed. A registered person paying the tax under the provisions of the section 10 shall for each quarter apart thereof furnish in such a form and manner as may be prescribed a return electronically of the turnover in the state or union territory inward supplies of goods or services or both tax payable and tax paid within 18 days after the end of the each such quarter. Subsection 3 every registered person required to direct tax and resource under the provision of the section 51 shall furnish in such form and manner as may be prescribed and returned electronically for the month in which such deductions have been made within 10 days after the end of the such month. The subsection 4, every taxable person registered as an input service distributor shall for every calendar month or part thereof furnish in such form and manner as may be prescribed, he return electronically within 13 days is for after the end of the such month. The subsection 5, every registered non-resident taxable person shall for every calendar month or part thereof furnish in such a form and manner as may be prescribed, return electronically within 13 days after the end of the calendar month or within 7 days after the last day of the period of registration specified under the subsection 1 of the section 27, whichever is earlier the subsection 6, the commissioner may for the reasons to be recorded in writing by the notification extend the time limit for furnishing the returns under this section for such a class of the registered person as may be specified therein, provided that any extension of the time limit is notified by the commissioner of the state tax or union territory tax shall be deemed to be notified by the commissioner. The subsection 7, every registered person who is required to furnish a return under the subsection 1 other than the person referred to in the proviso or thereof or the subsection 3 or the subsection 5 shall pay to the government the tax due as may be as per such a return not later than the last day date on which he is required to furnish such a return. He provided that every registered person furnishing the return under the proviso or to the subsection 1 shall pay to the government in such a form and manner and within such a time as may be prescribed an amount equal to the tax due taking into account inward and outward supply of the goods or services of both input tax credit availed the tax payable and such other particulars during a month or in lieu of the amount required to be in the class A, an amount determined in such a manner and subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed, provided further that every registered person furnishing the return under the subsection 2 shall pay to the government the tax due taking into account turnover in the state or union territory and inward supplies of the goods or services of both tax payable and such other particulars during a quarter in such a form and manner and within such a time as may be prescribed. Substitute for every registered person who is required to furnish a return under the subsection 1 or the subsection 2 or the subsection 3 or the subsection 5 shall pay to the government the tax due as per such a return not later than last date on which he is required to furnish such a returns, provided that the government may on the recommendations of the council notify certain class of registered person who shall pay to the government the tax due or pay a part thereof as per the return the gone before the last date on which he is required to furnish such a return subject to such conditions and safeguards as may be prescribed and as may be prescribed subsection 8, every person who is required to furnish a return under subsection 1 or the subsection 2 shall furnish a return for every tax period, whether or not any supplies of the goods or services or both have been made during such a period. Subsection 9, where any registered person after furnishing a return under the subsection A1 or the subsection 2 or the subsection 3 or the subsection 4 or the subsection 5 discovers any omission or incorrect the particulars therein other than as a result of the scrutiny, the audit, the inspection or enforcement activity by the tax authorities, he shall rectify such omission or incorrect particulars in such form and manner as may be prescribed subject to the payment of the interest under this act, provided that no such rectification of any omission or the incorrect particulars shall be allowed after the 30 days of the November following the end of the financial year to which such details pretends or the actual date of the furnishing of the relevant annual returns, whichever is earlier substituted for the words in subsection 10, the registered person shall not be allowed to furnish a return for the tax period if the return for any previous tax period or details of the outward supplies under the subsection 1 of the section 37 for the said tax period has not been furnished by him, provided that the government may, on the recommendation of the council, by notification subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be is specified therein, allows a registered person or a class of a registered person to furnish the returns, and even if he has not furnished the returns for one or more the previous period, or has not furnished the details of the outward supplies under subsection 1 of the section 37 of this for the said tax period, the registered section subsection level, a registered person shall not be allowed to furnish a return for the tax period after the expiry of the period of 3 years from the due date of the furnishing the said returns, provided that the government may, on the recommendation of the council, by the notification subject to the such conditions and restrictions as may be specified therein, allow a registered person or the class of registered person to furnish the return for the tax period even after the expiry of the said period of 3 years from the due date of the furnishing the said returns. The said returns of section 40, the first returns every registered person who has made the outward supplies in the period between the date on which he becomes liable to registration till the date on which registration has been granted shall declare the same in the first return furnished by him after the grant of registration. After the grant of registration, section 41, the a claim of input tax credit and the provisional acceptance thereof. Subsection 1, every registered person shall the subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed be entitled to the credit of eligible input tax as the self assessed in its returns, and such amount shall be credited to his electronic credit ledger. Subsection substituted for every registered person subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be prescribed be entitled to such credit of eligible input tax as self-assessed in such his return, and such amount shall be credited on the provisional basis to his electronic credit ledger. The subsection 2, the credit of input tax credit the availed by the registered person under subsection 1 in respect of the such supplies of the goods or services or both the tax payable thereon has not been paid by the supplier shall be reversed along with the applicable interest by the said person in such a manner as may be prescribed, provided that way the said the supplier makes the payment of the tax payable in respect of the aforesaid supplies. Said registered person may re-avail the amount of the credit reversed by him in such a manner as may be prescribed, as may be prescribed as may be prescribed the matching reversal and the section 42 matching reversal and reclaim of input tax credit, the input tax credit the this section has been omitted. Uh, Section 43, the matching, reversal, and reclaim of reduction in the output tax liability. This section also has been omitted. Section 43A, the procedure for furnishing of returns and and availing of input tax credit. This section also has been omitted. Section 44 annual returns. Section 44 annual returns subsection 1, every registered person other than the input service distributor or the person paying the tax under the section 51 or 52, a casual taxable person and non-resident taxable person shall furnish an annual return which may include a self certified reconciliation statement reconciling the value of supplies declared in the return furnished for the financial year with the audited annual financial statement for every financial year electronically within such a time and in such a form and in such a manner as may be prescribed, provided that the government, the commissioner may, on the recommendation of the council, by the notification, exempt any class of the registered person from the filing the annual returns under this section, provided further that nothing contained in this section shall apply to any register any department of the central government or the state government or the local authority whose books of accounts are subject to the audit by the computer and auditor general of India or auditor appointed for the auditing the accounts of the local authority under any law for the time being in force, substituted for every registered person other than in the subsection 2, registered person shall not be allowed to furnish the annual returns under the subsection 1 for the financial year after the expiry of the period of 3 years from the due date of furnishing the said annual returns, provided the government may, on the recommendation of the council by the notification and subject to such conditions and restrictions as may be specified, they allow a registered person or a class of a registered person to furnish the annual return for the financial year under the subsection 1 even after the expiry of the a said period of 3 years from the due date of furnishing the said annual returns the annual returns. Okay, thank you very much for today.